Picture a house, not a hovel, not a workhouse, an actual respectable, well-appointed Victorian townhouse on a good London street. 5 stories of pale stucco and polished brass, painted railings, a front door lacquered so black and so deep you could almost fall into it. Gas lamps outside, a butler who opens that door with his chin slightly elevated, as if the air at ground level isn't quite good enough for him. Now go around to the back, down the narrow service alley, past the coal hole cover set into the pavement, which is just a round iron disc with a chain attached, and beneath which is a chute that drops directly into the basement, and the coal dust has stained everything within 6 feet of it, a permanent grey, and the smell is sulphur and old smoke and something vaguely animal that you've learned not to investigate. Down the area steps. Those are the steps that go below street level, below the pavement, into the trench that runs alongside the house's foundation. People above can look down into this trench if they lean over the railings. Most don't bother. Open the service door. And now you're inside the other London, the one that smells of mutton fat and lye soap and yesterday's cabbage and the particular thick fug of 16 hours of coal-fired cooking trapped in a room with 8-foot ceilings and one window that looks directly at a stone wall. The one where the floors are stone flags that never quite warm up, no matter how hot the range gets, where condensation runs down the walls in winter and pools in the corners, where the copper pots hanging from the ceiling hooks are polished to a mirror shine every single week, because the cook insists on it, and if you miss a spot she will hold it up to your face and make you see yourself reflected back, distorted and stupid looking, and she will ask you whether that looks polished to you, and the answer is always no. The one where people live who make your life possible and whom you will never acknowledge. This is the basement kitchen of a Victorian townhouse. This is 1870. This is where you live, and you're at the absolute bottom of it. Not the bottom of the house. The bottom of the house would be the cellar, where they keep the wine and the coal and the occasional dead rat that nobody wants to deal with. You're at the bottom of the human hierarchy inside this house, the last rung. The person who exists so that everyone else can feel like they're not the lowest. The scullery maid. Your hands are cracked. They've been cracked since about the 3rd day of this job, and they haven't been uncracked since. The cold water does it, and then the hot water does it worse, and the lye soap does something that I count as chemical warfare, and then you plunge them back into the cold water, and somewhere in that cycle, the skin on your knuckles decides it's had enough and opens up in small, precise lines that sting like fury every single time you move your fingers. You get chilblains in winter. They're itching right now, actually, around your wrists and the joints of your fingers. A deep, maddening itch that you're not supposed to scratch because scratching makes it worse. And Mrs. Wren has told you 4 times not to scratch, and you scratch anyway because you are 14 years old and nobody on this earth has the self-control not to scratch a chilblain. You eat last, you wake first, you carry things, you clean things, you scrub things, you empty things that you would rather not think about. You heat water for everyone else's purposes and then use what's left over for your own washing. You sleep in an attic room so cold that ice forms on the inside of the window glass, and your blanket is thin enough to read a newspaper through, and the girl who had this job before you left her outline on the mattress, which is both sad and comforting because at least you know the mattress has been broken in. Your name is Nell Hartley. You're 14 years old. You came to London 3 months, ego from a village in Dorset called Stoke Abbot, which has a church, a public house, and approximately 200 people who all know everyone else's business. You came because your father's farm failed, and then your father got sick, and there were 6 children to feed, and a woman from the village knew someone who was hiring for a house on Lowndes Street in Belgravia. Belgravia. When they told you where the house was, you felt something lift in your chest, because Belgravia is where the quality live, the real quality. Not just well off, but properly, generationally, ostentatiously wealthy. The kind of people who have second houses in the country and third houses by the sea, and honestly aren't entirely sure how many houses they have because the solicitor handles all of that. What nobody told you, or what you didn't understand even if they tried, is that Belgravia being the best address in London makes exactly 0 difference to the quality of your mattress or the temperature of your attic room or the state of your hands. You're not living in Belgravia, you're living under it, so subscribe if you want, get comfortable. We're going below stairs. Here we go. Your eyes open at 4 in the morning, not because a bell rings, not because someone wakes you. Your body has learned. It took about 3 weeks, but now something in you simply stops sleeping at 4, like a mechanism that knows what it's for. For a half second, maybe less, you don't know where you are. You're in Stoke Abbot. You're in your mother's house, and the smell is bread and hay and your little sister breathing next to you, and the ordinary clean smell of a cold country morning. Then it comes back. The smell hits first. Not one smell. Never just one smell in this house. It layers. Coal dust from the range that was banked overnight, still faintly smoking even now. The damp cold of stone walls sweating. The ghost of last night's cooking. Lamb, and the particular fatty heaviness of braised onions and something that might be burnt milk from when Agnes forgot the pudding and nobody admits it was her fault. Your own unwashed self, because you get 1 bath a week on Saturday evenings and this is Thursday, and 3 days of kitchen work has worked itself into your hair and your skin, and underneath all of it, the rats. You don't see them often. Mrs. Wren, the cook, keeps a cat named Sovereign who is fat and malevolent and entirely unsuited to his job, but the rats know he's there, theoretically, and mostly stay to the corners and the walls and the deeper dark of the coal cellar. But you can smell them. A dry, dark smell, like old paper and something alive in the walls. Welcome to Lowndes Street, London, 1870. You swing your legs out of the bed and your feet find the floor, and the floor is cold enough that you actually inhale sharply through your teeth. The floorboards are bare up here. No rug. The servants' rooms don't get rugs. The servants' rooms, strictly speaking, don't get much of anything, which is why the attic smells of old plaster and cold air and the faint mustiness of the horsehair that's worked its way out of the mattress over the years. You dress in the dark. You've gotten good at this, good at finding the petticoat and the chemise and the rough cotton dress that is your uniform. Grey, faded, practical, the kind of fabric that shows everything and costs nothing. Your apron from yesterday is hanging on the hook by the door, still faintly damp. You put it on anyway. The damp settles against your dress immediately, cold as a hand. Your boots are at the end of the bed. You pull them on and tie them by feel. The right one has a crack along the sole that lets in water when it rains, which in London is most of the time, which means your right foot is perpetually slightly wetter than your left. You do not complain about this. Complaining is not something a scullery maid does. A scullery maid's job is to be useful and quiet and quick and invisible, and complaining is none of those things. You pick up the candle stub from the windowsill, the one you are allowed one of per week, and you light it from the lucifer match you keep in your apron pocket, and the small orange flame makes the attic room suddenly seem both more and less frightening. More because the shadows it throws are alive and wrong. Less because you can see there's nothing in them. You open the door and start down. The house is 5 stories tall and you sleep at the top, and the kitchen is at the bottom, and between them are 4 flights of stairs. Not the family stairs. You would never use the family stairs. There are the back stairs, the servant stairs, a narrow corridor that runs behind the proper rooms like a secret passage. And you know this passage better than you know your own name. You know which step creaks. You know where the plaster has gone soft in the wall beside the second landing. You know that on cold mornings the draught comes through the gap under the 3rd floor service door and hits you directly in the face, which is somehow more unpleasant than being generally cold, as if the cold is specifically targeting you. Down past the family bedrooms, you move quietly. The family's asleep. The family will be asleep for hours yet. They will not surface until 8 at the earliest. Some days not until 9 or 10. The master of the house sometimes doesn't come down until noon, and when he does, he expects a full breakfast, hot and ready and waiting, because time works differently when you're rich, when you're not the one who has to be up before sunrise to make the time work for everyone else. Past the 1st floor drawing rooms, where the furniture sits under dust sheets in the dark like sleeping animals, waiting for someone to bring them to life. Past the ground floor, where the front hall and the dining room and the morning room are, all of them dim and cold and smelling of beeswax polish and that indefinable quality house smell, something dry and expensive and very faintly floral. And down the last flight into the basement, here the air changes, it gets warmer or at least less cold, it gets thicker, it closes around you. The kitchen range is your first task. The range is the heart of the house. Everything depends on it. It's a Leamington range, black iron, about 6 feet wide, with a firebox on the left and a hot water boiler on the right, and a roasting oven in the middle and a spit rack and a dozen hooks and surfaces and compartments that have specific names and specific purposes which you are still learning. Mrs. Wren knows this machine the way some people know the Bible, chapter and verse, intimately and without having to think. At night the range is banked. The fire is kept low, not out, never out, because relighting it takes time and effort and the house needs hot water practically on demand, but low, controlled, just enough to keep the boiler warm. Your first job every morning is to coax it back to life. You set down the candle. You take the coal scuttle, which is heavy even empty, and is thoroughly not empty right now because you filled it last night before bed, because you always fill it the night before, because that is one of the rules, one of the 100 small rules that govern your existence, and you open the firebox door. The warmth comes out like a hand pushing you gently back. Even banked this low, the range holds heat the way cast iron does, deep and patient and almost aggressive. You take the poker, you work the coals. The technique is specific. You learned it wrong the first week, banking too hard, smothering the embers, and Mrs. Wren found you on your knees at 5 a.m. trying to relight the range from scratch with shaking hands. And she stood in the kitchen doorway in her wrapper and nightcap and looked at you for a long, terrible moment, and then said, simply, again, and showed you. Once. With the calm efficiency of someone who has no patience for having to show things twice. You got it right the next morning. You've gotten it right every morning since. The coals glow up orange. You add fresh coal in a ring around the edges, the small pieces first, and then you close the firebox door most of the way and adjust the flue and wait. You can hear the fire catching, a low crackle, a deepening hum, the range beginning to breathe again. While you wait, you start on the black lead. Black lead is what keeps the range from rusting, and what makes it look like the serious professional piece of equipment that it is. It's a paste made from graphite and oil and a few other things, and you apply it to the cold exterior surfaces of the range with a stiff brush, working it into the iron with small circular strokes, and then you polish it off with a different brush, a softer one, until the iron gleams. The smell of it gets on everything. Your fingers, your apron, your hair, the back of your throat. You apply it anyway, methodically, section by section. The decorative scrollwork at the corners takes longest. Your brush gets into the gaps and the lead collects there, and you have to work it back out with the tip of a folded rag, and your fingernails fill with it, and it will be under your fingernails for the rest of the day no matter how many times you scrub them. Outside, in the street above you, the city is waking up. You can't see anything from down here. The window looks at the area wall, grey stone 3 feet away, but you can hear the rattle of an early cart, the sound of a horse on cobblestones, someone calling to someone in the distance, London beginning to stir. In here, it's just you and the range and the click and hiss of iron heating up, and the small orange glow of the firebox door and the smell of coal and black lead, and the particular silence of a house full of sleeping people who don't know you're here, which is exactly how it should be. By 5 o'clock, you have the range going, properly the black lead done, the flue adjusted, the hot water beginning to tick and heat in the boiler. Now the hearths. There are 11 fireplaces in this house. You're responsible for the kitchen range and the servants' hall fireplace and the scullery hearth. Agnes, the kitchen maid, does the kitchen hearth. The housemaids, Mary and Ellen, do the upstairs fireplaces. They will be waking up soon, but not yet. The servants' hall fireplace first. You take the ash bucket and the hearth brush and the small shovel, and you go to the servants' hall, which is the room off the kitchen where the below-stairs staff eat their meals and sit in their time off, assuming time off is something that happens, which today it won't be. You clear the cold ash from last night's fire. The ash is white and fine and gets into everything. Your nose, your eyes, the hair at your temples. You try to breathe shallowly when you're emptying the ash bucket, but there's no really good way to do it. You just accept that you're going to breathe in some old ash. This is fine. This is the job. You lay the new fire. Newspaper first. You get the old newspapers, the ones from last week that have already been read, because fresh newspapers go upstairs on the breakfast tray. You scrunch them loosely. Then small kindling, the dry pieces from the box crossed in a little pyramid, then slightly larger pieces, then balanced carefully on top 2 pieces of coal. You light it with a match. Then you do the scullery hearth, which is smaller and simpler, but still matters because you will spend most of your day in the scullery, and working in a room with no heat when your hands are constantly wet is the kind of thing that makes you want to sit down on the stone floor and cry. You've done that exactly once, in your 2nd week, when the chilblains were bad and the temperature had dropped, and you'd been washing pots for 4 hours straight, and the cold water in the sink was actually making your hands go white. You sat down on the floor with your back against the wall and put your wet hands in your armpits and cried quietly for about 2 minutes. Then you got up and went back to the pots. Nobody saw, or if they did, nobody mentioned it. You light the scullery hearth now and watch the kindling catch and feel the first tentative warmth beginning to push back the cold of the stone walls. Better. Not good, but better. Agnes comes down at 5:30. Agnes is 17 and has been at this house for 2 years, and she knows things you don't know yet, and she lets you know it, not unkindly but consistently, the way a person presses a bruise to make sure it's still a bruise. Rangers going? Yes. Great. Done. She looks at the firebox door. She looks at the flue position. She doesn't say anything, which means it's right. If it was wrong, she'd have said something. Agnes fills the large kettle and sets it on the range. Then she starts on breakfast preparations, laying out the servants. Hall table, slicing the bread, finding the butter dish. The family's breakfast is not for several hours yet. The servants eat first at 6, then the family at 8, then any guests at whatever time they come down. The kitchen exists in this constant state of staggered production, feeding layers of people at different times and to different standards, the quality of the food rising as you go up the stairs. The servants get bread and butter and tea, good, strong, hot tea at least. That's not nothing. You've known mornings when that tea is the best thing about the day, when you wrap your cracked hands around the mug and let it do what it can for the chilblains, and you drink it too fast and burn your mouth, and that's fine, that's acceptable, because warm is worth the burn. You take the kettle when Agnes sets it to boil and you go to the coal cellar. The coal cellar is accessed through a low door at the end of the kitchen passage, and it is exactly what it sounds like. A low, dark room, full of coal, which arrives via the coal hole in the pavement above and falls down a chute, and makes a tremendous noise when it does, and leaves coal dust on every surface within a 10-foot radius. You have to duck to get through the door. Inside, it's fully dark. You hold up your candle and fill the coal scuttles. There are 3. One for the range, one for the servants' hall, one for the scullery hearth. And the coal is cold and heavy, and the dust gets in your throat, and you try to work quickly, because the longer you're in here, the more of it you breathe. By the time you come back out, your arms ache already, and it's barely 5:30. 3 coal scuttles, each one heavy enough to pull your shoulder out if you're not careful. You've learned to carry them low, close to your body, to walk with your back straight, and let your legs do the work rather than your back. Mrs. Wren showed you that, actually. Not out of concern for your health, but out of concern for her coal scuttles, because the last scullery maid dropped one on the flagstone floor and put a crack in it. Still, you carry them low. And your back is grateful, even if nobody is. Mrs. Wren comes down at 6 precisely. You have never once seen Mrs. Wren come down late or early. She appears at 6 as if she materializes directly into the kitchen, fully dressed, corset tight, hair pinned, already wearing her expression, which is the expression of someone calculating what needs to happen in what order and who is standing in the wrong place. She is a large woman, not fat, solid, the kind of solid that comes from decades of physical work, from lifting and kneeling and standing on the stone floors for 14 hours a day. Her hands are extraordinary, thick-fingered, calloused, stained, scarred in small ways from 100 small accidents, and still precise enough to pipe a decoration onto a pudding that could be mistaken for professional embroidery. She has grey eyes and a face that could be kind, but is currently not. She looks at the range. She opens the oven door, assesses the temperature with a hand held near the opening. She closes it. She opens the firebox and looks at the coal arrangement and closes it again. She says nothing. This is approval. The water fetching, she says. We need 4 more pails before breakfast. You were supposed to have done this already. You've been doing coal. Yes, Mrs. Wren. The water comes from the standpipe in the area. London has had running water for decades now, more or less, though the system is complicated and the pressure is unpredictable, and some days the standpipe produces a full confident flow, and some days it dribbles like an afterthought. You take the yoke and the 2 pails from the scullery passage, and you go back up the area steps into the cold morning air. The sky, What you can see of it between the buildings is the dark grey of early morning, not quite black, not yet blue. The gas lamps in the street above are still burning. You can see their light reflected on the wet cobblestones of the street-level pavement over the railing. A warm orange glow that has nothing to do with you. The water is cold. The standpipe is set into the wall of the area, a simple iron tap, and you fill the first pail and then the second. And the water is so cold that your hands hurt immediately. That particular clean, ice-cold hurt. That is somehow worse than the hurt from the hot water, because at least hot water makes you feel like it's doing something. You fit the pails to the yoke sits across your shoulders, the chains hanging down each side, the pails swinging, and you carry them back in. 4 trips. By the end of them, your shoulders ache and your hands are red, and you have splashed water on your dress and your apron, and there is a cold, wet patch against your left knee that will stay cold for hours. You pour the water into the copper cistern in the scullery. You hear it fill. You hear the range heating and the kitchen beginning to produce smells that mean the day has properly started. Tea and the bread Agnes has put to warm, and the faint smoky sweetness of the range on full heat. You sit on the step stool in the scullery and breathe for 30 seconds. Then Agnes calls for you. The pots from last night need to start, and when I say pots, I need you to understand what that means in an 1870 Victorian household that has just served dinner for 8. This isn't washing up in a modern kitchen. This isn't rinsing plates under hot running water and putting them in a machine. This is war. The pots are cast iron and copper and tin-lined copper and heavy earthenware, and they are coated on the inside with the cooked-on residue of whatever was in them, and your job is to get them back to the standard that Mrs. Wren requires, which is to say, clean enough that you could see your reflection in them, if they were the kind of thing that had reflections, which the cast iron is not but the copper is, and Mrs. Wren will check. The water in the scullery sink has been heating on the range. You pour it in. You add the soap, lye soap, hard and yellowish, smelling of fat and alkali. You lower the first pot in. The steam rises. Your hands go in. The water is hot enough to hurt. Not scalding, not quite, but hot enough that your first instinct is to pull back. And you don't pull back, you keep going. Because if you use water that's too cold, the grease doesn't come off, and you're there twice as long, and twice as cold is worse than once as hot. Your hands are red already. The pot is from last night's soup, a clear brown stock judging by what's baked on, the ring left around the inside from hours of simmering. You take the brush and you scrub. The motion is mechanical, circular. Your elbow moves, your shoulder moves, your wrist stays firm. The brush is stiff-bristled and slightly worn and doesn't perform as well as it used to, but requesting a new brush would mean mentioning it to Mrs. Wren, and there is a risk calculation involved in every interaction with Mrs. Wren that you have not yet mastered. The grease comes away slowly, little particles of it floating in the water that's already turning grey. You work through the pots in order of difficulty. Soup pot first, relatively clean. The stock pot, which has a ring like a bathtub tide line. The roasting pan from the beef, which has burned on fat at the edges that you will be there with the scraper for 10 minutes. The double boiler from the sauce, the inside of which looks like someone poured old leather into it and let it set. Your hands move in and out of the hot water. When the water cools, you add more from the range. When it cools again, you add more. By the end of 2 hours, your skin is the colour of old salmon and the texture of overcooked pork, soft and faintly falling apart at the edges, and the small cuts from the cracked skin have been in and out of hot water so many times that they have a specific, exact quality of sting that you're starting to think is simply what your hands feel like now, permanently. The baseline condition of being you. Your back hurts from bending over the sink. The sink is not at a comfortable height. It was designed, you suspect, without the height of the person using it in mind. Which makes sense because the person using it was not really a person who needed to be comfortable. The sink just needed to be a sink. You adjust your posture, straighten, arch your back the way you've learned. Keep going. The roasting pan takes 11 minutes. You count, not because it helps, but because it gives the work a shape. When you pull it out of the water and hold it up in the grey light from the window, it is clean. Not gleaming, cast iron doesn't gleam, but clean. The black of the iron showing through, the interior surface clear. Mrs. Wren passes through the scullery doorway. She looks at the pan. She says nothing. You put it on the drying rack and reach for the next. 1. At 7:30, the household bellboard begins to ring. The bellboard is on the kitchen wall, a row of small brass bells on springs, each one labelled drawing room, dining room, master's bedroom, mistress's bedroom, nursery, guest room 1, guest room 2, morning room, library. When a member of the family pulls the bell rope in a room, the corresponding bell on the board jingles. This morning it starts with the master's bedroom bell. Mr. Ashworth is awake. Mr. George Ashworth, 43 years old, son of a successful textile merchant from Manchester, now himself a man of business with an office in the city, and a membership at his club, and the vaguely satisfied expression of a man who has inherited enough money that his own commercial ventures feel like hobby rather than necessity. He has never, as far as you know, been in the scullery. He has, as far as you know, never thought about the scullery. Thomas, the footman, takes the hot water up for Mr. Ashworth's morning. Wash. Mary, one of the housemaids, takes the coal scuttle up to the master bedroom to light that fire. Agnes begins the breakfast preparations in earnest, and you keep going with the pots. This is the shape of the morning. The house wakes up in layers, each layer triggering more work in the layer below, a cascade of demands flowing downward, and at the bottom of all the cascades is you, in the scullery, hands in the sink. By 8, the breakfast is going up. Kidneys and bacon and kedgeree and toast and marmalade and butter and coffee and tea and fresh cream, all of it assembled and covered and carried upstairs on silver trays by Thomas. And the pots from the breakfast preparation start coming back down. 3 pans for the kidneys. You fry them in 3 batches. Mrs. Wren has a specific protocol for this. The double boiler for the kedgeree because Mrs. Wren doesn't trust the rice to do anything properly without supervision. The toasting fork, the coffee pot and its accompanying filter apparatus, the teapot from the servants' hall which you're allowed to do after the families. You work through them. Around 8:30, Agnes brings you a piece of toast and a mug of tea from the servants' breakfast. You eat standing up at the scullery bench. You eat quickly because there are still pots, and because sitting down feels like something that requires permission that you haven't been given. The tea is strong and dark and slightly too hot, and it is excellent. The toast is slightly cold because it was cut some time ago, and the kitchen is warm but not warm enough to keep toast warm. It's fine, it's bread, it's solid, and it fills something. You finish it in 4 bites, drain the tea, put the mug back on the kitchen dresser and return to the pots. At 9, Mrs. Wren calls you out of the scullery. This happens rarely. Your natural habitat is the scullery and the coal cellar and the area steps. Being called into the main kitchen usually means either that something has gone wrong or that something is about to be made that requires the kind of preparation that Agnes is too important to do, but you are not important enough to be trusted with unsupervised. Today it's the second one. There is to be a dinner party tonight. You knew this in a vague way. The way you know things that are 2 tiers above your station. You knew there was a dinner party coming because the kitchen has been operating at a slightly higher intensity all week. The way a ship moves differently when a storm is coming. Not panicking, not yet, but everything slightly tighter, slightly more focused. 14 guests, a menu that Mrs. Wren recites to you with the gravity of a general briefing troops before a significant engagement. Turtle soup, dressed salmon, removes of saddle of lamb and roasted duck, 4 entrees, jellies, a charlotte russe, soufflé. You'll be doing root vegetables this morning, Mrs. Wren says. She sets a basket of turnips and parsnips and carrots in front of you. All of them, peeled, cut, in the cold water by noon. Then she goes back to her domain. You take a vegetable knife, the good one, sharp, the one you are allowed to use without supervision now, because you have demonstrated that you can do it without taking your fingertip off. And you sit on the low stool and you start. Peeling vegetables is something the mind can do without the mind being fully present. Your hands work, the drag of the knife along the carrot, the curl of orange peel falling. The next one, the turnip's harder skin requiring more pressure, the resistance of it under the blade. The smell of raw vegetables is clean and cold, earth and green, and something sharp from the parsnips that gets up your nose, and your mind, with nothing specific to do, goes where it goes. It goes home, not with grief, not anymore. The first 2 weeks here, thinking about home felt like pressing a fresh bruise. Now it's more like touching an old scar, familiar, not painful. Exactly. Just a thing that's there. Stoke Abbot in September. The harvest done and the smell of cut wheat still in the air, and the light that particular amber of early autumn that makes everything look like a painting of itself. Your father in the kitchen, which he barely ever was, sitting at the table with a cup of tea because there was nothing to be done in the fields, and your mother telling him to fix the loose gate, and him saying he'd get to it, and the gate still loose the following spring. Your sister Mary, who is 7 and who was furious when Nell left because Nell had been the one who told the stories at night, who made up the tales about the fields behind the house being full of sleeping knights waiting to wake up. You'll send money home at Christmas, a few shillings, what you can spare. Mrs. Wren pays you £2 10 shillings a year, which sounds like almost nothing because it is almost nothing, but there is also board and keep, which is its own kind of value, even if the mattress is thin and the room is cold. £2 10 shillings is more than your father makes from the farm in a bad year. You've sent 1 letter home since arriving. Mrs. Wren let you use the paper from the household supplies, and you sat at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and wrote it very carefully in your best hand. And when you reread it before sealing it, you thought it was both completely honest and completely inadequate, the way descriptions always are of places you've never been and then are. You wonder if they miss you. You wonder if they've stopped missing you, which is worse. The parsnip in your hand, the knife, the cold water bucket, the next one. You concentrate on what's in front of you. Just before 11, Mrs. Wren sends you out. This happens sometimes. A specific errand, a particular ingredient needed from a particular supplier. The kitchen network of suppliers is extensive. The butcher on Hooper Street, the fishmonger near Sloane Square, the Italian, warehouse for olive oil and dried pasta, and other things that the cook uses for certain dishes and procures from her own established sources, rather than leaving it to the household accounts to manage. Today it's mushrooms. Morel mushrooms, Mrs. Wren says, handing you a note and 3 shillings. Not the dried sort they'll try to sell you, the fresh. Mr. Bell on Brompton Road. Tell him Mrs. Wren at Lowndes Street. He'll know what to give you. You put the shillings in your apron pocket and take the note and go. The city hits you the way it always does when you come up from the basement. It's too much at once, too loud, too wide, too many things happening in too many directions. In the scullery the world is small and bounded and has specific things that need to happen in a specific order. Out here, everything is happening simultaneously, and none of it is your concern and none of it is organised, and the sheer quantity of it, every single morning you come out still catches you, sideways, Lowndes Street in November. The pavements are wet. It rained overnight and the cobblestones are slick and the gutters are running with a grey mixture of rainwater and everything that finds its way into gutters in London, which is considerable. The air smells of coal smoke and wet stone and horses. Always horses. London in 1870 runs on horses the way London in another century will run on engines that burn oil. There are horses everywhere. Working horses pulling carts and drays. Cab horses. Carriage horses in matched pairs for the quality. Dray horses from the breweries, enormously wide and extraordinarily patient. Street sellers' ponies, milk horses, and the smell that comes with horses, and the sound. Hooves on wet stone are like nothing else. That particular percussion, heavy and rhythmic and slightly unpredictable, because horses are alive and have opinions about where they put their feet. You walk quickly. Your breath makes small clouds. You pull your shawl tighter. You get a wool shawl for outdoor errands, just the one. It lives on a hook by the service door and whoever's going out uses it and brings it back. It smells of the last person who used it. Agnes mostly, probably. Something slightly floral, probably from the kitchen herbs. Brompton Road is 10 minutes' walk from Lowndes Street. You've done this errand once before, 3 weeks ago, for fish rather than mushrooms, and you know the route. Left out of the area gate, along Lowndes Street to the corner, north toward Brompton. The neighbourhood changes as you go. Belgravia is wide streets and tall houses, and the air of money that has settled here so long it's part of the architecture. The pavements are clean. The railings are painted. Even the horses seem better dressed. As you move toward Brompton Road, things loosen slightly. The houses are still fine, but not quite as fine. There are more shops, a pharmacist, a glover, a stationer, a coffee house with steam fogging its windows, a young woman selling bootlaces from a tray around her neck who catches your eye and offers them with a hope in her face that you recognise. That particular hope of someone who's had a bad morning and needs a sale. You shake your head. She moves on. The street vendor smells as you pass. A pie seller with a tin on a stick. The smell of hot pastry and gravy hitting you at 10 feet and doing something violent to your stomach. You haven't properly eaten since the toast this morning. Pies are a penny. You have 3 shillings that belong to Mrs. Wren, not you. You walk past the pie seller. Brompton Road is busier. The omnibuses run along here. Those enormous horse-drawn vehicles, knife-box shaped, that carry people across the city for a few pennies. They run on fixed routes at fixed intervals, and they're very slightly less chaotic than the regular traffic, which is not saying much. You wait for a gap in the traffic and cross. The wet cobblestones under your feet. A horse passing close, enough that you can feel its warmth and smell it. that specific warm living smell. Mr. Bell's place is halfway down the block between a bootmaker and a chemist's shop. The name is painted on the glass in gold letters, W. Bell and Son, Fruiterers and Purveyors, 1842. The smell hits you at the door, green and dark and earthy, cellar cold air, the smell of things growing in dampness. It's not a bad smell. It's one of those smells that has multiple layers. There's the clean green of fresh herbs. There's the dense earthiness of mushrooms specifically. There's the sweetness of autumn fruit, apples and pears and something more exotic in a crate near the back. Mrs. Wren's girl. He knows you from last time. Mr. Bell's son, who's about 30 and has his father's shape, broad through the shoulders and getting broader. He wraps the mushrooms in paper. Good fresh morels, properly damp, with that particular smell that you'd know anywhere, that deep, complex, smoky forest smell that seems too large for something so small. Shilling and 4, he says. You count it out from the coins in your pocket. He takes them. He puts the package in a cloth bag. Tell Mrs. Wren we've got truffles in. French. Not cheap, but good. I'll tell her. You put the bag carefully in the crook of your arm and go back out into the street. You should go straight back. You know that. The mushrooms need to be back in the kitchen, and you need to be back at the sink, and there are still pots from last night. And now there will be 2 days' worth of pots because the dinner party tonight will generate a quantity of washing up that you don't want to think about yet. But the way back takes you past the corner of Sloane Street, and if you go just a little further, just a quarter mile south of where you need to be going, you'll be at the edge of Chelsea. And in Chelsea at the embankment, you can see the river. Mrs. Wren gave you no specific time limit on this errand. She said before noon. It is barely past 10. You go. The Thames in November. It's nothing like what you expected when you first imagined it from Dorset, when the river was something from books and songs and the weight of it in people's mouths when they talked about London. You expected something grand, something mythic. What the Thames actually is in 1870 is a working river, an enormous, complicated, churning working river. It is also, and there is no gentle way to say this, tremendously foul. The great stink was a decade ago. That was 1858, when the river smelled so catastrophically bad in summer that Parliament had to hang curtains soaked in chloride of lime in the windows of the Houses of Parliament just so MPs could breathe. That prompted action. Joseph Bazalgette's great sewers have been being built for years now. The largest public engineering project London has ever seen, meant to intercept all the sewage that previously just ran directly into the Thames and carry it away downstream, but 1870 is not after. It's during. The sewers are not finished. The river is better than it was 12 years ago. But better is relative. Still. Standing at the embankment and looking at it, you don't think about what's in the water. You think about the size of it. It is enormous. It is grey-brown and moving and alive with boats, wherries and barges and steamers, and the flat-bottomed lighters that move cargo from the moored ships to the docks. On the south bank you can see the tops of factories, the Lambeth potteries, a brewery. The beginning of what will be, in a few years, a proper embankment like the one they've made on the north side. The wind off the water is cold and tastes of salt and mud and the complicated chemistry of a tidal river in a city. Across the water, the shot tower at Lambeth, that tall, narrow structure where they drop molten lead from a great height into cold water to make perfect spherical musket shot. The lead falls 150 feet, and in falling and Cooling it becomes round. A simple, elegant physics of death. A barge passes below you. The bargeman stands at the stern with his pole. He has the slightly disconnected expression of someone whose job requires constant attention, but not thought. Someone who has been doing this so long that the river is just where he exists, not somewhere he's going. Further upstream, you can just see the towers of the Houses of Parliament. Westminster. The new palace. Completed only 20 years ago after fire took the old one. The new towers and Gothic battlements already blackened with London's soot to look as if they've been there for centuries. The clock tower. You can't read the clock face from here, not at this distance, but you know it's there. Big Ben's bell has been in that tower since 1859. 11 years. Already everyone knows it. Already it's just the sound of London. You've heard it, faintly, on still nights from the attic. The deep note of it rolling up from the river. It doesn't wake you. Nothing wakes you when you're sleeping, because by the time you're asleep, you're deeply, thoroughly asleep, the way people who do physical work all day sleep. But you've heard it in the half-awake moments, that low bronze voice counting the hours. You stand at the embankment for maybe 5 minutes. The cold off the water is penetrating even through the shawl. The mushrooms in the bag on your arm. You think about Stoke Abbot, about the River Brit, which you could jump across in most places, about how small it seemed when you were young, and how it seemed like enough of a river, about how the Thames would look to your little sister. You think about how much has changed since 3 months ago when you were her. Time to go back. You're back in the kitchen by 11:20, which is well within the time Mrs. Wren gave you. The mushrooms are inspected, approved with a single nod, and set aside in the larder. And then she tells you about the dinner party, not tells you exactly, tells the kitchen. You're part of the kitchen, a small and specific part of it, but part of it. Agnes is already measuring flour. Mrs. Wren stands in the centre of the room with the menu card in her hand and recites the battle plan. 14 guests, 7 courses, service à la Russe, which is the modern way, dishes served in sequence rather than all at once, which means the timing is critical, which means the range schedule is critical, which means every stage of preparation has to be coordinated exactly. She assigns tasks. Agnes, these soufflé bases and the pastry work. Mary Talbot, who comes in from the village to help on dinner party days, and is 40 years old and has been in service since she was your age. The sauces. Thomas, the footman, will be upstairs all evening, which means that the carrying and the bringing and the physical communication between upstairs and downstairs falls to the bellboard and the dumbwaiter. Nell root vegetables, all of them fully prepared by noon. Then every pot and piece of equipment as it comes dirty from the prep work kept clean throughout the day. Then at 6 o'clock the scullery is to be properly set up for the washing up after dinner, which means hot water ready, soap ready, the drying cloths laid out, the sequence of things planned. During service, Mrs. Wren says, you will be in the scullery. You will not come out. If something breaks, it comes to you and you deal with it. If something needs rewashing, same. I need you quiet, and I need you fast, and I need your head working. Yes, Mrs. Wren. She looks at you for a moment. Not kindly, not unkindly, assessingly. You've done well this week, she says. Don't make it strange. She returns to her planning. You take the vegetable basket and sit back down on the stool and pick up the knife. Your hands are already aching from the morning. There are still hours to go. The kitchen in the hours before a dinner party is like watching a calm person think through something complex. From the outside, it looks controlled. It is controlled. Mrs. Wren does not allow panic in her kitchen, and the staff have absorbed this the way you absorb the rules of any place you live in, through repetition and the occasional consequence. But underneath the control there is an intensity, a focus that makes the air feel different. Every movement is deliberate. Every sound is intentional. The smell builds through the afternoon. The stock that has been simmering since early morning, brown and dark and rich, the smell of bones and onion and bay and something deeper beneath all of it. The pastry Agnes is making, that pure cold flour and butter smell, the butter warming in the pan for the mushrooms you brought back, the wine that goes into the sauce, good wine, Burgundy, poured from the bottle that the butler Mr. Fletcher brought down from the wine cellar with the expression of a man surrendering something precious to a cause. The wine smell, it makes the kitchen smell briefly like somewhere people have choices. You keep to your station. Pots come to you throughout the afternoon. The stock pot, when Mrs. Wren is done with it, scoured and restored. The pastry board, the copper saucepans that are used for the sauces, requiring the inside to be polished bright before service, because Mrs. Wren will not send anything upstairs in a pot that isn't correct. And you work through them. Around 2 o'clock, Agnes brings you a bowl of soup. The soup that will not go upstairs, the pot-washing soup, the collected stock that is a byproduct of all the preparation. It's excellent. It is better than anything you would have eaten 3 times a day in Dorset, thick with the richness of the stock, with softened vegetable and something deeply meaty about it. You sit on the step-stool and eat it with bread. Your hands hurt. You hold the bowl with both hands and let the warmth of it do what it can. Agnes sits on the opposite bench eating her own bowl, and for a few minutes neither of you says anything, just the sound of the soup and the range and the distant sounds of the house above. "Nervous?" Agnes asks. "For the party?" "First proper dinner service you've been here for. They had one in October, but you were still too new." "A bit. Don't be. Your job doesn't change, just more of it. More pots, faster. The timing's the only thing different." Mrs. Wren seems, you search for the word, like it matters. Agnes looks at you with the particular expression of someone who is about to say something both obvious and important. It always matters to her, Agnes says, every single meal. Soup for 2 or dinner for 14, she's the same. She doesn't have another setting. A pause. "It used to annoy me. I thought she should. I don't know. Relax sometimes. Let something be not perfect." Agnes looks at her soup bowl. "But then I thought about it, and I think she can't. Because if she lets herself believe some meals don't matter, she'd have to start deciding which ones, and once you start doing that..." She doesn't finish the sentence. You think about what she means, about the work being the work regardless, about doing the thing the same way every time, because the consistency is the thing, because the work is what you have, and the quality of it is the only thing that belongs to you entirely. "She said I'd done well this week, you say?" Agnes raises an eyebrow. "Did she?" "She said don't make it strange." Agnes laughs. It's a real laugh. Short, but real. "That's high praise from Mrs. Wren. You go back to your soup." At 3 o'clock the butter arrives. This is the moment that tells you the dinner party is real. Not the menu being recited, not the cleaning, not the preparations, but the butter. Because the Charlotte Russe requires a particular butter, and the soufflé requires a particular butter, and Mrs. Wren will not have both made with the same butter, and so she orders from 2 suppliers, and the second delivery is, Always at 3, you carry it in from the area. 2 pounds of pale Normandy butter in a ceramic crock. Cold and dense, slightly salty smelling. Mrs. Wren receives it with the reverence most people reserve for religious objects. She presses it with one finger. She smells it. She nods. You go back to the pots. Around 4:30, the house bell begins to ring more frequently. The mistress's bedroom bell, the drawing room, the morning room. The family is awake and moving and preparing for the evening in ways that require things from below. Hot water goes up constantly. The bedroom fires must be replenished. Thomas is running up and down the back stairs. Ellen, the housemaid, is doing the last of the upstairs preparations. Fresh flowers in the drawing room, the candelabras checked, the dining table laid. Ellen is the one who does the dining table, which is the equivalent of what Agnes does in the kitchen. The point where the household's work becomes visible to the people who live in it. The white damask cloth with not a crease in it. The crystal glasses arranged just so. The silver gleaming. You will never see the dining table tonight. You will be in the scullery. But you can imagine it, vaguely, from having seen the hall glimpsed through the green baize door at the bottom of the stairs. That door that separates the servants' world from the family's world as cleanly as a border crossing. You've gone through it once, on your first day, carried upstairs to be inspected by Mrs. Ashworth, who looked at you for approximately 30 seconds, asked your age, and said, "Very well," with the tone of someone approving a purchase. The upstairs smells different. Beeswax and dried flowers and the particular quality of carpet that's been brushed and cleaned and occupied for years by people who don't work. There's a stillness to it that you don't get downstairs, where the air always moves with the heat from the range. You think about the dining table, about the people who will sit around it, about the food that Mrs. Wren has been preparing for 2 days, which will travel upstairs and be eaten and commented on in ways that will never reach downstairs, not accurately. You think about the mushrooms you carried back from Brompton Road. They are in the sauce right now. You can smell them from here. You put your hands in the hot water and keep going. At 5 o'clock something breaks. It's not catastrophic. In the scale of things that can go wrong in a kitchen on a dinner party evening, this is minor. But in the moment it feels total. Agnes has been tempering the sauce for the salmon, the velouté, and she's been tempering it over a double boiler, and the double boiler is one of the older pieces of equipment, the tin lining showing age, and at 5 o'clock with the kitchen at full heat and pressure, the inner pot decides it's done. The seam gives, not all at once, a split, a hiss, and then sauce spreading across the bottom of the outer pot, diluting into the water, half the velouté lost. Agnes makes a sound that is not quite a word. Mrs. Wren is at the range. She turns. She looks at the double boiler. She looks at Agnes. She looks at the range clock. There are 3 hours until service. "Make more," she says. Her voice is completely even. "Mrs. Wren, the stock. There's stock. Make more. Quickly." Agnes's face goes through several expressions. You watch this from the scullery doorway, where you have stopped with a pot in your hands, because this is the kind of moment that holds attention. Agnes starts again, from stock that is fortunately still on the range. A strong fish stock, pale and deep at the same time, and she begins building the sauce again with the focused speed of someone who has been through this before and knows the only way out is through. Mrs. Wren says nothing more. She returns to the Charlotte Russe, which she is setting in its mould. You take the ruined double boiler to the scullery and start on it. The guests begin arriving at 7:30. You know this because Thomas, who makes the trip downstairs between answering the door, announces it to no one in particular. First guests. The kitchen is at a level of activity that makes the morning seem like rest. Every surface in use, the range at full heat, all 4 hob positions occupied, the oven holding 3 separate things at different temperatures. The smell now is extraordinary, deep and complex, the kind of smell that a kitchen produces when everything is working correctly, when the butter and the stock and the wine and the reduction and the cream are all doing their correct things and the heat is right and the timing is right. Mrs. Wren moves through this with complete authority. She tastes things. She adjusts. She tells Agnes to reduce the cream sauce by another quarter. She tells Mary Talbot the lamb needs 5 more minutes, not 3. She tells Thomas when he comes for the first remove that the soup is ready and the tureen is on the hot plate, and to carry it level, for the love of God level, she will not have soup in the saucer again. Thomas takes the tureen with both hands carefully and goes upstairs. In the scullery you prepare. Hot water in the main sink. Cooler water in the rinse sink. Drying cloths laid on the rack. The sequence of things organised in your head. Glasses first because they take the most care, then the porcelain, then the silver, then whatever else comes down. The first things arrive from upstairs. Soup plates, already warm from the service, carrying the ghost of the turtle soup in their bowls. You handle them carefully. The Ashworth's china is blue and white, a fine translucent porcelain, and dropping a piece would be the kind of event that gets into the ledger of things held against you, possibly permanently. You wash them in warm water, not the scalding hot water of the morning pots. Fine china does not want scalding hot water. It wants warm and careful and gentle. You rinse them. You dry them and set them on the rack. More plates come. The fish course, smaller, silver-rimmed, the smell of the salmon sauce coming off them. The pace increases. Dishes come down, you wash them, they go back up, in a cycle that feels like a current running through the house. You're the last stage, the final station, the thing that makes the whole process possible, that keeps the cycle going. You work without stopping. Your hands are in and out of the water. The warm water, the rinse, the cloth. The warm water, the rinse, the cloth. Again, again, again. The heat in the scullery rises as the range pushes heat through the whole basement. Your back aches, your shoulders ache. Your hands, which have been in water for most of the day, are completely numb at the fingertips and stinging at the knuckles and still moving. Halfway through the dinner service, Thomas comes down, carrying a broken wine glass. Not broken dramatically. The foot has snapped clean off, the way glass sometimes does when it's set down too firmly on a hard surface. The bowl still intact, the stem, just the foot gone. He puts it on the scullery windowsill. Mr. Fletcher says that's 2 in a month, he says, meaning something you're not quite sure of. Not mine, you say, which is technically true. Nobody's, Thomas says. Glasses just break. That's the great mystery of dinner service. He goes back upstairs. You look at the broken glass. The foot is a neat disc. You set it carefully in the bin for broken china, which has its own spot in the corner of the scullery. Then the next dishes come down. At 9 o'clock, Mrs. Wren appears in the scullery doorway. This doesn't happen during dinner service. She has too much to manage in the kitchen. She looks at the rack, which is a study in organised chaos. Dishes drying, glasses upturned, silver laid flat. She looks at you. The soufflés have gone up, she says. If they've gone right, we've done it. There is something in her voice that she doesn't usually allow there. Not pride exactly. Something like relief, or the pre-relief, the moment just before you know. If they haven't, she continues, I'll hear about it. They'll have gone right, you say. You don't know why you say this. You have nothing to base it on. But Mrs. Wren looks at you for a moment, and something in her face shifts slightly, and she nods. Yes, she says, they will. She goes back to the kitchen. The soufflés went right. You know, because Thomas comes down 20 minutes later and says, with the casual delivery of someone delivering good news about something that was entirely expected, they were well received, and he goes back upstairs. Agnes exhales. Mrs. Wren says nothing. She begins the process of cleaning the kitchen range. You keep going with the dishes. The guests leave sometime around 11. You know this because the bellboard rings the front doorbell repeatedly in a short space of time, and then the sounds from above go quiet, and then the final wave of dishes comes down. Dessert plates and finger bowls and the last of the crystal, and the cheese plates and the coffee cups. 14 guests, 7 courses each. 14 times. 7 is 98 individual settings, plus serving dishes, plus every pot and pan that made the food, plus the preparation equipment from the afternoon. You count them as they come and you don't think about the total. You just wash the next one. Mrs. Wren brings you a piece of Charlotte Russe at 11:30, the actual dessert, on an actual plate. A piece from the one that was set aside as the cook's portion, which is a tradition. The cook gets a portion of the centrepiece dessert because the cook made it. She puts it on the scullery bench beside you. When you've done the glasses, she says, you do the last of the glasses. You set them on the rack with care that by now is almost automatic. The particular attention for fragile things that has become part of how your hands work. Then you sit on the step stool and eat the Charlotte Russe. It is extraordinary. The cream is set but still light. The sponge fingers have absorbed something that is part cream and part vanilla, and part something barely alcoholic, just enough to add depth. The whole thing is cold and sweet and complex in a way that you know. Sitting here at midnight in a scullery with aching hands, you will remember. You eat it slowly. You have earned the time to eat it slowly. The kitchen is quiet now. Mrs. Wren is in the kitchen writing in her account book. Agnes has gone to bed. Thomas has gone somewhere. Thomas goes after dinner service that nobody mentions. You eat every last bite of the Charlotte Russe, and you run your finger around the plate and you lick it, because there is no one to see, and it is midnight. And you have been awake since 4 a.m, and you deserve to lick the plate. Then you wash it. You finish the washing up at midnight. The last pot goes on the rack. The last cloth gets draped over the rack edge. The water goes grey and cold, and you let it drain, and it makes its slow sound disappearing. Your hands are the colour of cooked prawns. The cuts are open. The chilblains are past itching and into a bone-deep ache that you know will be worse tomorrow morning. The scullery is clean. The kitchen is clean. The range is banked. Mrs. Wren comes to the doorway. She looks at the scullery. She looks at the rack. She looks at you. Go to bed, she says. That's all. Nothing more. But from Mrs. Wren, on the night of a 14-guest dinner service, in a tone that is not its usual assessing neutrality, but something just barely, almost imperceptibly warmer. That's enough. The stairs take forever. You've climbed them 100 times and they've never felt this long. Past the kitchen level, past the ground floor, past the first floor, where the drawing room will still faintly smell of the guests' perfume and cigar smoke, that particular expensive mixture that the houses in Belgravia exhale, past the second floor where the family bedrooms are, all of them dark and quiet. Past the third floor, where the better servants' rooms are. Agnes has a room on this floor. It's not large, but it has a small fire grate and a proper rag rug, and she's been here long enough to have a few things of her own on the shelf. Up to the fourth floor, the attic, your door. You don't bother with a candle. You know this room by dark. The floorboards under your feet. Cold. The window, its small rectangle of night sky. The mattress. You sit down on the mattress and take your boots off. Your feet are actually the only part of you that have had an easy day. Feet are not required for washing pots. You lie back. The sounds of the house are settling, the creak of timbers contracting as the range goes down for the night, a far-off clock from somewhere in the street. The faint, constant murmur of London, which never fully goes quiet because there are 500,000 people here and some of them are always awake, always moving, always doing whatever they do in the London night. Your hands throb against the mattress. You look at the ceiling, which is invisible. You're 14 years old. You're 3 months from Dorset. You have washed somewhere between 50 and 100 plates today, and prepared vegetables and carried coal and fetched water, and spent 16 hours on your feet, and your hands feel like they belong to someone who is much older than you. And somewhere in this house, above you, the dining room smells of the meal you made possible. The Charlotte Russe that you now know is extraordinary, the soufflés that went right, and somewhere above Lowndes Street, in one of those houses that are all dark and gleaming and expensive looking, there are people who ate very well tonight, and who will sleep well tonight, and who tomorrow morning will perhaps mention to each other that it was a good dinner, that Mrs. Wren does well, and won't it be nice to do it again in the spring, and the credit will stop there, at the cook's name. Which is fine. That is how this works. You know the work that was done. You were there for it. You were part of it, the invisible part, the part that makes the visible parts possible. That means something, even if the only person who knows it is you. Your eyes close. The weeks are like beads on a string. You count them differently than the family does, differently than the world above stairs does. You count them in the rhythms of the house, in the standing days and the dinner party nights, in the cold mornings when the range has to be coaxed, and the mornings in spring when the light comes earlier and the air coming in through the area has something different in it, something green, and even in the basement kitchen you know the season has changed. November becomes December. December brings cold that you understand now in a new way. Not as weather that happens to you, but as a physical opponent. The water at the standpipe is so cold that your hands go numb within seconds of touching it. The walk to Brompton Road or the fishmonger near Sloane Square becomes something you brace yourself for. A specific challenge. Your breath coming in small clouds. Your feet feeling the wet of the pavement through the crack in your right boot that still hasn't been repaired. But December also brings Christmas, and Christmas in the kitchen is remarkable. The preparations begin 2 weeks before. Mrs. Wren's Christmas pudding ritual. The dried fruit soaking in brandy for a week. The sweet and the breadcrumbs and the brown sugar and the eggs and the spices going in on stir-up Sunday, while every member of the below-stairs household takes a turn with the wooden spoon and makes a wish, and you make a wish so earnest and so specific that you feel embarrassed by it and say nothing about it to anyone. The smell of that pudding steaming fills the entire basement level. 6 hours on the range, the steam rising, the whole kitchen warm and fragrant in a way that reaches back through time to something so basic about warmth and food, and people gathered together that even you, 14 years old and far from home, feel something loosen in your chest that you didn't know was tight. On Christmas Day, the Ashworths give the servants their presents. You receive a length of calico, enough for a new dress, and 2 shillings. Mr. Ashworth comes downstairs to give them, which is apparently unusual. Many employers send their housekeeper. And he stands in the kitchen looking slightly displaced and says Merry Christmas and goes back upstairs. You send the 2 shillings home with a letter. You eat well at Christmas. The servants' table gets a roast and plum cake and ginger wine. Mrs. Wren, who drinks nothing all year, has 2 glasses of port on Christmas evening, and her face goes slightly pink, and she tells a story about her time in a great house in the north, a house with 40 servants, a house where the storerooms alone were the size of this whole basement. And her voice in the telling is not nostalgic exactly, more like someone turning a coin over in their fingers to see both sides. Agnes catches your eye across the table and raises her ginger wine very slightly. You raise yours back. January comes like a door closing, cold and dark and long. The days blur. The routine of it settles into you like the cold settles into the stone floors, deeply, completely, so that you stop noticing it is there because it is simply the temperature of your world. But something changes too. Mrs. Wren starts teaching you, not formally, not announced. It begins with corrections. You're emptying a sauce pot wrong, scraping the spoon like that leaves residue. Use the edge, not the flat. And then the corrections become demonstrations, and the demonstrations become instructions, and the instructions become, slowly, carefully, the first real education in cooking that you've ever had. The sauce broke because the heat was too high, she says one afternoon, watching you rescue a béarnaise that Agnes started and left. What do you do when a sauce breaks? You don't know, she tells you. Cold water, off the heat, whisk continuously, bring it back gradually. The sauce is not gone. Things that seem ruined are often not ruined if you catch them quickly and know what you're doing. You have good hands, she says, steadier than Agnes was at your age. Agnes is still sometimes too fast. You don't say anything. That doesn't mean fast is wrong. Speed is something you can learn. The steadiness is harder. She looks at the sauce. Bring it back to the heat. Slowly. You do. The sauce comes back together, smooth and pale yellow and tasting, when Mrs. Wren dips her tasting spoon, exactly as it should. Good, she says, and that is the lesson for the day. But the next day there is another, and the day after that. You are learning, without having been told you're learning, how to cook. Not as a scullery maid, as something more than that. Spring comes in March, which in London means not spring but a reduction in the severity of winter. The light changes before the temperature does. You notice it in the mornings, the way the grey of 6 o'clock has a different quality, something blue in it, the suggestion of coming colour. The chilblains recede. Not gone. They'll come back next winter probably. They come back every winter for the rest of most people's lives who work in cold, wet conditions, but receding. Your hands are still cracked, but differently so, the deep winter cracks healing to their normal pattern of smaller damages. The new kitchen maid starts in April. Her name is Sarah, and she's 15, and she comes from a village in Buckinghamshire, and she looks at the kitchen the way you looked at it in October, with the expression of someone who has just realised that the place they've arrived in is going to require something of them that they didn't entirely plan for. You show her the range, you show her the black lead, the correct technique, and you show her once the way Mrs. Wren showed you, and when she does it wrong the next morning you show her again. You feel doing this approximately 80 years old. You're 14, going on 15. You're the person who has been here 6 months, which is not long, which is also somehow long enough to know the things that matter. The sink is cold in the mornings, you tell her. It gets easier. She doesn't believe you. You can see it. That's fine. She will. On a Sunday morning in May, you are sent, for the first time, alone, without an errand, to the park. Mrs. Wren says this with no explanation. Sunday service is over. The kitchen is clean. The family has gone to church. Take an hour, she says, not looking at you. Take yourself to the park. You don't ask why. You take the shawl from the hook. Hyde Park in May. You've seen it from the outside, from the perimeter walks, from the top of the omnibus that runs along Knightsbridge. You've never been in. The gate is wide. The path is gravel under your boots, clean and bright in the morning light. The trees are coming into leaf, that particular May green that looks almost too intensely green to be real, as if someone has turned up a dial. The air smells of cut grass and something floral from the beds near the gate, and the cold water smell of the Serpentine just visible to the north. There are people here, families mostly, Sunday dressed, taking the morning air, nursemaids with prams, children with hoops and sticks, a group of young men in good coats walking with the slightly exaggerated ease of people who know they're in a good coat. You walk. Nobody notices you. A girl in a grey dress and a plain shawl walking alone on a Sunday morning. There are dozens of girls like you in this park, all of them on their half-day off, all of them walking the same wide paths for the same reason, to be somewhere that isn't the basement. The grass is thick and green and slightly damp. You leave the path and stand in it for a moment. The dew soaks through your boots almost immediately, but the feeling of standing in grass, proper grass, not the cramped patch at the back of the house that's more mud than grass, is something your body recognises at a level below words. Dorset, the fields, not painful, just present. You walk to the Serpentine and stand at the edge and look at the water. It is a lake set in a park, set in a city, and it looks exactly like what it is, which is something tamed and arranged and made beautiful on purpose, the way everything in London is made beautiful on purpose. Constructed beauty rather than the unself-conscious beauty of countryside. But it's still beautiful. A heron stands at the far edge, grey and still, waiting with the absolute patience of something that knows exactly what it's doing. The water is dark green and still this morning, the trees reflected in it, almost perfectly. You stand there for 20 minutes, maybe 25, then you go back down the area steps, the cool of the basement coming up to meet you, the smell, coal and lye and yesterday's cooking and the range and the particular damp cold of stone that is the smell of your life now. The smell that you carry on your clothes when you go out and that you stop noticing after 5 minutes inside because it is simply where you are. Mrs. Wren is at the kitchen table with her account book. She doesn't look up. Better, she says. You think about the heron, about the green of the grass, about standing somewhere without thinking about what needed doing next. Yes, you say. She makes a note in the account book. Good, put the kettle on. June, and a discovery. You're cleaning the larder shelf, a job that happens monthly, everything out, shelves wiped, things put back in the correct order, and you find, behind a crock of preserved ginger, a book, a small book, bound in cloth, slightly water-damaged at the spine. The title, in plain lettering, A Plain Cookery Book for the Working Classes by Charles Elmé Francatelli. It has been here a while. There are food stains on some pages. Someone has marked passages with a folded corner. The margins have small notations in a handwriting you don't recognise. You take it to the scullery. During the moments when there is nothing urgently needing to be done, they exist sometimes, brief windows between the tasks. You read it. The language is direct, practical. The recipes are written for people who are, as the title suggests, working, not for people who have infinite time and a French chef. But the principles in it, the logic of why things work, temperature, timing, the chemistry of heat applied to fat, applied to protein, these are the same principles Mrs. Wren has been teaching you by demonstration, without naming them. Here they have names. You read about stock, about the Maillard reaction, which the book doesn't call that, but describes the browning of meat in a hot pan, the specific flavour compounds that develop, the reason you sear before you braise. You read about pastry, about gluten formation, and why cold butter and cold hands and cold water matter. You read about bread. You're 14 3/4, and you're reading a cookery book in a scullery in Belgravia, and something in you is reaching toward this the way the range fire reaches toward the air. You put the book back behind the ginger crock when you're done with the shelf, slightly less hidden than it was, in case someone is looking for it, in case it belongs to someone. Nobody mentions it. The next time you clean the larder shelf, you take it out again. In July, Mrs. Wren is ill, not seriously. A cold, a bad one, but just a cold, but seriously enough that she stays in her room for 3 days and the kitchen runs, must run, on Agnes and Mary Talbot and you. On the first day, Agnes manages the dinner, a simple meal, roast chicken, nothing complex, the kind of thing she can do in her sleep. On the second day, one of the guests for luncheon is unexpectedly particular about the sauce, which is the reduced cream sauce for the fish, and Agnes is at a critical point with the pastry for the tart, and you're in the kitchen doorway looking at the sauce that needs constant attention. Can you manage it? Agnes says, not looking up from her pastry. You think about the book. You think about Mrs. Wren's hands on the spoon. You think about the rescue of the Béarnaise in February. Yes, you say. You take the sauce. The cream has been reducing for 12 minutes. You can see by the way it clings to the back of the spoon that it needs another 4. You keep the heat steady, not high, steady. And you stir and you taste and you add the smallest amount of white wine at the end, the way Mrs. Wren always does, the way the book explains, to cut the richness and lift the whole thing. 4 minutes, and then you take it off the heat. Agnes plates the fish. Sauce poured, it goes upstairs. No one comes back down to complain. Agnes looks at you when the plates come back clean. She's teaching you, Agnes says. It's not a question. Yes. Agnes nods slowly, thinking about something, then. She's never done that with a scullery maid before. You don't know what to say to that. Just so you know, Agnes says, that's... She pauses. That means something. She goes back to her pastry. You go back to the pots. But you carry that with you for the rest of the day. Mrs. Wren comes back on the 4th day. She inspects the kitchen with the thoroughness of someone who knows that 3 days is exactly enough time for standards to slip in small specific ways. The stock pot, the cleanliness of the range, the organisation of the larder. She says nothing until she reaches the scullery. She looks at the rack, at the way the coppers are hung, at the organisation of the brushes. She looks at you. The Alderton luncheon, she says, the fish sauce. Yes, Mrs. Wren. Agnes told me. A pause. Don't get ahead of yourself, she says. Her voice is exactly its usual tone, not warm, not cold, level. No, Mrs. Wren, but another pause. The word hangs there for a moment. You might have potential if you work at it. She goes to the kitchen. You look at the scullery sink for a moment. Potential. You file that away where you keep the other things. The charlotte russe, the soufflés that went right, the heron at the Serpentine, the book behind the ginger crock, the things that are yours. Summer deepens. The heat in the basement gets profound. On the worst days of July and August, the temperature in the kitchen near the range reaches levels that make the air itself feel thick. A physical presence. Something to push through rather than breathe. The copper pots sweat. The stone floors are the only cool thing, and in the brief moments when there is nothing to do, you stand on them with your bare feet while Agnes rolls her eyes and doesn't say anything. The food smells differently in summer, more intense. The meat needs using quickly. The cream must be kept in the coolest corner of the larder and used the same day. Everything is on a shorter clock. You learn this. You learn all of it. The rhythm of it. The rhythm of the house and the kitchen and the year. The deliveries and the seasons. The strawberries in June, when Mrs. Wren makes preserves with the intensity of a general defending a position, filling jar after jar with the summer, sealing it in against the winter, the game in autumn, the root vegetables that will carry you through January, the ones you peel in November by the basket. Your hands change. They are no longer the hands of someone from Dorset who has done farm work and housework. They are kitchen hands, the calluses in different places, the particular competence in the wrists and fingers that comes from specific repeated motions, the knowledge in the palms of what a properly worked dough feels like versus an overworked one, the understanding that your hands have become tools as specific as the knives and the spoons, trained for a particular kind of work. Your right boot still leaks. In September, Mr. Ashworth gives you a half-crown out of the housekeeping for a new pair. It is the first new thing you have owned since you arrived in London. You buy them on a Saturday morning at a cobbler on Brompton Road, 3 doors from the mushroom cellar, and you wear them back and your feet feel the difference on the wet pavement. Both feet equally dry for the first time in almost a year. You stand for a moment outside the cobbler's, on the pavement, in the new boots, in the September morning with the smell of autumn coming in off the river. London in September smells of rain and smoke, and the particular sharpness of changing seasons, the green going out of things. 1 year. You've been here 1 year. The person who stepped off the carrier's cart from Dorset on a cold October evening, who stood in the Lowndes Street area and knocked on the service door with shaking hands. She is still in you somewhere, but she's not running things anymore. On a Thursday evening in October, exactly 1 year after your arrival, Mrs. Wren does something unprecedented. She asks you to make the staff supper, not tells, asks. What do you want to make? She says. You stand in the kitchen for a moment, thinking. Agnes is watching you from the corner of her eye, pretending to be busy. You think about the book, about what you know, about what would be right. A braise, you say. The neck end of mutton, with root vegetables, and bread. Mrs. Wren considers this. The mutton needs 3 hours minimum. I know. Started at 4. Yes. She goes to her room. You go to the larder. The braise takes 3.5 hours and it is not perfect. The mutton is slightly overcooked by about 10 minutes, which changes the texture, in a way that's not wrong, but is not what you intended. The stock you built the braise in is good, though, deep and dark and richly flavoured, from the bones you roasted first and the wine you added at the right moment, and the bundle of herbs you put in because the book said to and because it smelled right. Agnes eats 2 bowls. Thomas eats 2 bowls and a third serving of bread, which he tears and uses to mop the plate in a way that indicates opinion more clearly than words. Mrs. Wren eats 1 bowl. She finishes it. She sets the bowl down. The mutton was a few minutes long, she says. I know. Why? I was watching the sauce. I should have checked the meat earlier. A pause. Yes, she says. Next time. She stands up from the table. The stock was right. The seasoning was right. The braise was right, except for the time. She goes to her room. Agnes looks at you across the table with an expression that you have learned to read accurately over the past year. It's the face she makes when she wants to say something but thinks it would be slightly too much. Don't let it go to your head, she says, but she's smiling when she says it. That night is when the city becomes different. Not because anything in it changes, but because you, in the attic room, looking at the same rectangle of sky you've looked at every night for a year, understand something that's took 12 months to get here. The city is not trying to defeat you. It felt like that at first. London is so big and so indifferent and so relentlessly itself that you can stand in the middle of it and feel not small exactly, but unregistered, not counted, not real in the way that real things are real. But the city just is. It's a thing that exists and continues to exist, and what you do inside it is up to you. What you make of the cold mornings and the cracked hands and the smoke and the soot and the standing pipe in the area that goes cold in winter. You've spent a year here. You know streets, you know faces. You know the feel of this particular city's particular autumn, the way the light goes on Thursday afternoons in October on Brompton Road, the way the Thames smells at low tide when you walk to the embankment on an errand. You know how to rescue a broken sauce. You know how to read a kitchen. You know that Mrs. Wren is teaching you something she's never taught a scullery maid before, for reasons she hasn't explained, and that the right thing is to learn it and not ask why yet. You know that below you in the kitchen there is a fire that you lit this morning and that will need coaxing again at 4. And you know that you will be there at 4, that you will be there in winter, that you will be there for however many years it takes. And something about knowing that, not happiness exactly, steadiness, the certainty of a person who has found where they are. Outside, London goes on. The last omnibuses of the night rumble along Knightsbridge. Somewhere to the north a dog is barking with the intermittent conviction of a dog that is not sure what it's barking at but feels strongly about the principle. A clock strikes 11, then the half. Then something further away strikes something you can't quite count. The city breathes around you. 500,000 people breathing, resting, working, moving through the night in their separate lives, all of them contributing to the same vast hum of a city that does not sleep fully, ever, because cities don't sleep, because there is always a fire to be stoked and a pump to be managed and a road to be swept and a river to be worked. Your hands throb against the mattress, a slow pulse that is just the ordinary sensation of hands that have worked all day, that will work again tomorrow, that are in their cracked and stained and chilblained reality, becoming capable, becoming something. Close your eyes. Not the knell of now, not exactly, but close enough. Let the sounds come in from the street and then let them go. The clop of a late horse, the distant rumble of something on the embankment, the creak of the house settling, the timber and plaster of a Victorian townhouse adjusting to the temperature like all old buildings do, like a person shifting in sleep. You've earned this, not in the way that people who use that phrase usually mean it, not in the grand sense, Not in the sense of deserving, which is a more complicated question, but earned in the simplest sense. You have used your body today in service of something. The food went up. The dishes came back clean. The kitchen was ready for tomorrow when you left it. That is an exchange. Work for rest. The oldest exchange there is. Take what you've earned. Your breathing slows. The ache in your hands becomes background. Something you know is there but are no longer specifically attending to. The sounds of the city soften, the way they do at this hour, the way they do when your body has decided that consciousness is no longer its highest priority. Let them soften. Let them go. Somewhere in this city tonight, there are people in drawing rooms with gas lights and Sèvres china and silk upholstery, discussing whatever it is the quality discuss when the dinner is over and the port is circulating. Politics, probably. Business. The state of things in Europe. Whether Gladstone is right about this or wrong about that. Whether the railways are changing things too fast or not fast enough. And somewhere in the same city, in the gin shops and the courts and the alleys by the river, people are navigating the London night with whatever tools they have. The watermen tying up their boats, the night soil men doing what has to be done, the crossing sweepers sleeping under bridges, the link boys. There are still link boys in 1870, even with the gas lamps in the darker alleys, leading strangers home for a penny. All of them in the same city, all of them tonight. And you here, in between. Not at the top, not at the bottom. Somewhere in the middle of the long climb on the stairs, still. But climbing, that's not nothing. That might be everything. Tomorrow there are pots. There are always pots. The range wants lighting at 4, and the coal scuttle wants filling, and the area water wants fetching, and the vegetable basket will be full of something that needs peeling, and Mrs. Wren will be in the kitchen at 6 precisely, and Agnes will follow at past, and the whole machinery of this house will begin its daily motion, layer upon layer, each layer enabling the one above, all of it supported at its foundation by the fire you light in the dark before anyone else is awake. Tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is just this, the mattress that fits you now, that has learned the shape of you these 12 months, the thin blanket that is not adequate but is what you have and is enough, the rectangle of sky, clouded tonight, not showing stars but showing light, always showing light, because London never goes entirely dark. You're warm enough, you're fed enough, you're safe enough. Your hands are healing slowly as they do every night, building up for tomorrow. Your back has already stopped talking to you. The deep muscle tiredness is settling into sleep the way it always does when you've truly used your body, turning itself into rest. Get it. Centuries from now, Lowndes Street will still be there. The house will still be there, or something very like it, or a building that rose after the first one ended. The street will be paved differently. There will be machines in it that nobody in 1870 could describe accurately. The gas lamps will be gone, replaced with light that comes from wires, from places so distant the electricity travels to reach you. The scullery will be gone. The job will be gone. The specific particular reality of 4 in the morning and cold water and black lead and 16 hours will be gone, or transformed so completely that the word gone is easier. But the idea of, it won't. The idea of being the person who does the work that makes everyone else's work possible. The person who lights the fire before anyone else gets up. The person at the bottom of the chain who, if they stopped, would stop everything. That person never goes away. They just change what they're doing, and wherever they are, however many years from now, lying awake in the dark before sleep takes them, thinking about what they did today and what needs doing tomorrow, they're not so different from you. The human part of it doesn't change. The tiredness doesn't change. The small satisfaction of something done well doesn't change. The rest you've earned, that doesn't change. Let sleep come. The way it came to Nell Hartley on a Thursday night on Lowndes Street, in the attic of a house that ran on the work she did. Let the sounds go. Let the thoughts soften. Let your hands be still. Let the night take what it's owed. The same as last Thursday, the same as next Thursday, the same as all the Thursday nights stretching forward into a life you can't yet see. But that is already beginning. Tomorrow the range needs lighting. But that's tomorrow. And you have everything you need to get there. Sleep. Good night.